Faster than writing to a letter forum, more thoughtful than angry clickbait, able to discuss the world's first superhero in comics, film, TV, and more. It's the Supermaniacs. And I am joined here with Mike to talk about one of our favorite depictions of Superman. That is, of course, the CW show Superman and Lois. Just finished its 4-season run. So, Mike, how the hell are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm good. We were originally going to have this podcast episode back in December, but then some jerk James Gunn had to drop a trailer for some movie and take up all the conversation had to be focused on that. But that is the problem you want to have, right? Is to have so much content out, so much good media for your character that there's too much to talk about.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I know that we're both massive fans of this show, and it just went out on a really strong note with its 4th season. So we'll get into the Superman and Lois talk in just a moment. I should say that we're going to spoil the hell out of it. So if you haven't seen the show, maybe we could do like a little bit of like non-spoiler, just kind of general thoughts, and then we'll be like, okay, now the spoilers are coming, so yeah. Bounce out. But let's get into that in just a moment. Just want to ask anyone listening or watching this, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're trying to grow the audience in the months leading up to the James Gunn movie coming July 11th. So be sure to subscribe and share and spread the word, or rate the Supermaniacs on podcast platforms. There's a little bit of news, speaking of the movie side of things, with the DCU, which still kind of bothers me that it's like the movies and TV shows, like the James Gunn stuff, is just DCU. Like, shouldn't it be like DCCU or like, I don't know, I need like an extra letter in there or something. Not DCEU, but...
Yeah, I wish. I think he's just like, I don't feel like doing that. He's just like, fuck it, because MCU is just MCU, so he's just like, it's the same thing, but it's not the same thing because of what it is. Is it Detective Cinematic Universe? Does that make...
I mean, to me, like, the DC universe is like, well, that's whatever, like, the modern main continuity of the comics, right? Would be like the DCU. But apparently, I don't know, is that the DCCU now? Is that the DC comic book universe?
I don't know. It's all confusing. The hell, DC Comics as a name is confusing because DC stands for Detective Comics.
Yeah, and also like what is and what isn't in continuity or in what universe is always changing.
Exactly.
But the big exciting news was the Jason Momoa casting for Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow coming out next year in 2026.
It's very interesting that that's still its current plan, because based on the announcement, he's still reading. So they have, as far as I know, they haven't started filming anything.
No, but they start production in like a week. Like they're going to be shooting like this month.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. I know it's quicker more and more lately to make movies. I was just worried effects wise, I guess is a good way of putting it. But I'm hoping that he's going to give them enough time to make those effects shine.
But that's one of the things about James Gunn that he keeps talking about, is that in this new movie universe, nothing will get a green light until there is a finished script they're all happy with.
I'm happy that's his idea, though.
Yeah, it can be a little weird because apparently, as a result of that, we're going to get a Clayface movie before we get a Batman movie.
That is, it is the funniest thing about all that, is that sometimes it's easier to write something like that really quickly, especially if you have a good enough idea for it. But it's strange in general because he keeps doing stuff with heroes that we don't know anything about in his Creature Commandos, apparently, because I heard Batman showed up in an episode for a quick second.
Yeah, that was the first appearance of the DCU Batman. So Superman appeared briefly in a dark vision of the future that showed a lot of heroes defeated, and Batman is also there as well as Wonder Woman and a couple others. But then they actually had Batman himself in the flashbacks to one of the Creature Commandos characters. If you're not watching the show, it's just every episode so far this season. The last episode comes out in a couple of days, but each one kind of has a different character's backstories. And when they did Dr. Phosphorus, Gotham City based character, they had a brief blink and you miss it appearance of the DCU Batman.
Yeah, it's crazy. We're trying like he's going all in on this universe, but not he hasn't fully built it yet, which is why it's so weird to me that he's done that.
And that
Like
was
we don't even know who's supposed to be Batman at this point.
right, right. And who knows when they're going to cast an actor. I mean, there could be something as crazy as like, a post-credit scene in one of these movies coming this year or next year or something is like, "Oh yeah, and like so and so, here's I don't know, Carl Urban as Batman." I always thought Urban would make a good like dad Batman since it's going to be Bruce and Damian with Batman and Robin.
I can see
But
that actually.
he's probably too old now. He's like in his 50s, I think. So they probably want to go with someone like a little younger.
Oh, then it's stop Iron Man.
Yeah, that's true. Like Robert Downey Jr. was like close to 50, I think, when that first one came out.
Yeah, and he was like 60 or something by the time it ended. And now he's coming
He's
back.
not even
Doctor
done. He's
Doom.
like the character is done, but I'm not. Give me a different character. So, uh,
90 as Deadpool says it.
but yeah, one of the things that kind of frustrated me with Creature Commandos, which I do generally really like, and maybe it'd be good to do like a review of that on here since it's Superman adjacent and is setting up part of that big new universe. But um, it surprised me how similar it was to the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, and I'm like, okay, you can change it up a little bit, Gunn. You can do some different stuff. But I realize now that he had written this while he was working on those projects. And originally, this was just going to be pitched to HBO Max as something else to do alongside Peacemaker. This was before he knew he was going to take over DC Studio. Before like he knew DC Studios was even going to be a thing.
Yeah, there's no
So
way this was originally his idea to be the opening valve shot
right.
of the DC universe because nobody would have thought that. Like it's just he already had this whole thing scripted out, finished, and everything. He's like, okay, I just have to rework some stuff here and there, and then I'm done. And and by then he probably hired. He already had everybody in mind. He probably had all that stuff already set up. And well, hell, he wasn't even originally going to do Superman himself. He was like he decided like at last minute that he was going to do it.
Right. Yeah. Initially, that was going to be left open to another director to potentially come in. And I remember there was a lot of speculation, who would he want to go with? But then he was finally, he's Thanos at the end of Age of Ultron. He's like, fine, I'll do it myself.
Out of nowhere too, like because that was one of the reasons. Like what you just said is the main reason everybody was worried about it, is because everything he had made up until this point is just Guardians of the Galaxy, but slightly different. So it was, of course, it was Guardians, and then it was the Suicide Squad, and now you're saying the Creature Commandos. So everybody's worried that he doesn't know how to do anything outside of that. But that's not. I never thought that was true because all he does is he's very good at ensembles, more than
Mm.
most people are, which is the reason I think Superman might work out fine, even though everybody's like, there's a lot of characters. Like, yeah, but he knows how to balance a lot of characters better than most do. So I have a feeling that it'll work out just fine.
Yeah, I have a lot of trust in James Gunn. I've liked all of his previous work. I love everything he's been saying about this movie. And the fact that like he wanted to do it himself, that like he was that excited about it. He didn't have to fall on the grenade if he had like any doubts about if this movie would work or not. He didn't have to like put his neck out on the line and direct it himself. He could have hired someone else, and then if it did well or did poorly, it would have been someone else's problem.
It's one
But
of the
like,
ballsiest things I've heard of somebody especially like you're now given in charge to the ability to mold the new cinematic universe, and instead of like starting it in a way that is within your wheelhouse, he went the exact opposite direction. Like he's not known for his like super hopeful characters. That's the best way of
yeah,
putting it.
yeah. So it'll definitely be new and be different. But it sounds like from some of the things that we've already learned about this movie, it will be it's going to be like a little bit more serious. It'll still have like some comedy, but like it'll play a little more straight than most of his previous movies, and I think it'll be like a little like less pop. Like we're probably not going to get like There will be some music in there, but not nearly like the amount of like needle drops that we get with like Guardians of the Galaxy, you know?
I'm trusting him the way I trust every comic writer when it comes to Superman. This is going to sound funny because a lot of people don't know this about certain writers. Every writer that you love who has made weird, insane, um, like deconstructions of characters, like whether it be the boys, whether it'll be the Authority, like those types of guys, they all love Superman with a passion. Like there's not a
Yeah.
single one of them. Like no matter how like depressing they sound, sometimes you ask them about Superman, their eyes will light up. So it's the same. It's the same deal with James Gunn. It's the same. Like if you've ever read, I think it's called Hitman. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's by Garth Ennis. If I remember
The
correctly.
Garth, yeah, no, the exact Garth Ennis story that you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing Superman story that just happens in the middle of this very weird, very dark character storyline. But he's never out of character that entire thing. Even the character of Hitman's just like, God, I love Superman. Like the entire, like the entire time it's happening. And so I feel like that's how James Gunn is with it. When somebody's allowed the chance for something like this, I can't blame him for doing it. There's like anyone else in his position would have done the same thing.
And we should say, speaking of the news, but it is kind of amazing that the Superman trailer immediately became the most viewed trailer in the history of DC or Warner Brothers.
Oh yeah, it exploded. And when we were talking about it, it was at what, 80 million, something like that.
Yeah, it was high in the tens of millions. I don't know where it is now, but
It's way past that. Like it's in the hundreds at this point, hundreds of millions, which is super impressive for a Superman movie because none of the other, like you said, the history of WB and DC, that's a lot. That means not even
yeah.
the Snyder movies or the Superman Return ones or the Dark Knight trilogies, like any of those movies. That's
Yeah.
crazy to me.
Or Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or yeah, like other big franchises too. He basically said like, yeah, this is the biggest thing ever except for maybe Star Wars and Marvel.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's that's unheard of in this landscape right now with everybody yelling out superhero fatigue. And it's the first
Yeah.
time in a while that I've like, oh wait, superhero fatigue is a myth. It's just it has to be something that people are interested in.
Yeah, I'm curious how well it'll perform at the box office. I'm curious. I think the Batman was 800 million worldwide, I think. I should look these numbers up before I start pulling stuff out of my ass, but I know it came in like a little shy of a billion if I recall correctly. And I'm
Yeah, that was one
curious.
of the reasons people considered it disappointing. I'm using quoting fingers because it was an amazing movie, but that's why people were worried about DC stuff because stuff wasn't hitting 1 billion anymore the way every superhero movie was.
Right.
Even Marvel's struggling at it, but they've been able to pull it off every now and then.
Well, their last big one, I believe, was Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Like, have they done anything that's grossed that well since then?
I don't remember. I don't think they have. I don't even remember what their last actual theatrical movie was outside of that.
But now you have the Guardians guy making Superman, and I think Superman has the potential. I think it can perform like on par with the Batman. Who knows? We might crack a billion here. It is hard to tell these days. You know, movies don't do like they used to do. But unless you're Mario,
Yeah, that's the reason people think there's superhero fatigue is because the movies aren't doing the way they were immediately, no matter what it was. Like, everybody hated Batman v Superman, but it made an insane amount of money. But after that, none of them did.
yeah, I think because everyone hated that one so much that they stopped going to DC movies, or at least
I know
a
that's
big
exactly
chunk
what
of the
happened.
audience did.
Nobody wants to admit it, but that's exactly what happened. Actually, Deadpool and Wolverine, that one made a
Okay,
billion, but that's because it's Deadpool and Wolverine. Like,
right.
there was no way that wasn't going to do well.
Yeah, they had 20 years of X-Men movies to like build up that movie. So,
No, that is like the way it was the end game of X-Men movies. Is the best way of putting it.
but I'm excited to see Jason Momoa join the DCU as Lobo. I hope that means at some point we get a Lobo versus Superman fight. But I'm excited he's going to be hanging out with Superman's cousin next year.
Lobo is such an amazing character. I can't wait for the rest of the world to discover who he is again. And the reason I say again is because the fun thing about Lobo is he's shown up in a lot of other stuff before this. He's in Superman the animated series, of course, which is where
Hmm.
I fell in love with him, and then I read some of his comics. And then he was in Young Justice as well. And then he
Hmm.
was a DLC character for Injustice 1. And so, luckily, some people kind of know who he is, but I don't think enough people know who he is. And I'm really excited for the rest of the world to discover who he is.
He showed up on Krypton too, but no one watched that show.
That's true. I forgot he was on Krypton, and I even watched that show. And he looked great in that show, by
He
the way.
looked great. Him and Brainiac both look like they knew how to make their Superman villains look great.
Him, Brainiac, Doomsday looked really good in it.
Yeah, but that movie is also it's based on the Tom King comic Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, which I didn't know this, but apparently he originally wanted to use Lobo in that story, and the editors asked him not to for some reason. So I wonder if this will be the way that King was going to use him, or if this will be just something very different.
I think when all that stuff was happening, they're still trying to figure out which Lobo was still Lobo at that point. If you
Oh,
remember
right.
that,
There is
a lot of
New
people don't know
52
this.
Lobo.
Yeah, people call him Phobo.
Uh huh.
Not because, but honestly, it's because it was the weirdest idea I've ever seen. Somebody was just like, "What if we made a Lobo comic, but instead of following the Lobo you know and love, what if that guy turned out to be an imposter, and the real Lobo was the skinny, handsome-looking guy who was like the world's greatest bounty hunter or the universe's greatest bounty hunter, who was not very interesting." And he had a series that lasted a decent amount of time. He showed up in a bunch of stuff, and then, as far as we know, he still exists. He showed up in a Green Lantern comic, the last I heard, after Rebirth happened, and no one has seen him again since.
Well, if anything, the new appearance in the movies next year will get the comics to be like, oh, we got to tell like a bunch of Lobo stories this year. So I bet he shows up in some, or I bet he's mentioned or referenced in something soon.
Oh, he was part of House of Brainiac just recently.
I'm talking about Phobo though.
Oh,
Phobo wasn't
oh,
though, was
who
he?
the hell knows what happened to that guy? I don't know. Like, yeah, he was. There was a comic. I found this out from somebody else. I was talking about him, and I was like, I wonder whatever happened to him. He's like, well, apparently he's like trapped somewhere because it was some sort of Green Lantern comic where Guy Gardner grabbed this bottle and it had him in it, and he's like, is it this one? And Green Lantern and Hal's like, no, not that one. Put that one down. And then that was like the last anyone ever saw of the guy.
Where he was like trapped in something.
It was like a Brainiac bottle or something,
Okay.
like something like that. And I found the panel of it because I looked it up and I was like, oh, that's literally him. And this is after Rebirth re-established that Lobo is Lobo again, because he had like died or something. The version we know, he had been, I don't, either died or he just got his head chopped off. I can't remember. But then
Yeah.
one day somebody's like, I don't care about that guy, and they stopped. They even gave him a daughter. Lobo has a daughter now, who I really like too. She's a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
Crush, right?
Yeah, I like Crush a lot.
Yeah, for people who don't know, Lobo has regenerative healing factor powers like Wolverine or Deadpool. So if he is like killed by something, he'll probably just come back eventually. So he's
Yeah,
an
he's
easy
got the
character to
absurd.
resurrect.
Yeah, he's got absurd healing factor stuff the way Deadpool does, but he's very similar to Deadpool. He's so close though. He's like borderline for fourth wall breaking. He kind of does, but not the way Deadpool does. So he's like really close. But he's fantastic. You guys will love him. And Jason Momoa is the perfect person to be that character.
Well, before we dive on into Superman and Lois, just want to remind people that that entire show is now available streaming on Max. You can watch all 4 seasons. And so I recommend people, if you haven't finished the show, then bounce out of here before we talk about spoilers. Go watch it all on Max and then come back.
And if you're waiting for physical, it's supposed to all drop out at once on April sometime in April. It's on a pre-order on Amazon right now.
Yeah, I have not pre-ordered, but I do plan to get the complete series because I haven't bought any of those.
Yeah, I just need to get season 4. That's already up for pre-order. I'm probably gonna do that later. But I'm very, very excited.
The other thing that's on Max now is the Superman. I think it's like Super/Man documentary about Christopher
Yeah.
Reeve. Have you seen that yet?
No, the reason is I don't feel like crying right now.
It will make you cry.
Because every single person who's either watched it, posted about watching it, says they bawled their eyes out for like an hour the entire
Yeah.
time.
So sometimes with documentaries, I'll just watch them on my phone when I'm like, like doing the dishes or something, just kind of like treat it like a YouTube video on in the background. So like I had that on playing on my phone when I was doing some house cleaning, but like I kept having to like stop what I was doing because I was getting like so emotional just hearing about a lot of it was stuff I already knew too, or like I remembered. I remember being a kid in 1995 when he had the accident that ended his well, didn't end his acting career, but definitely ended his Superman acting career.
It ended a lot for him, and
Yeah.
it ended the myth of the Superman, I guess, for a lot of people our age, where it was just like he's invulnerable. We always thought like even the actor for some reason was like that, and then it was considered the second what Superman curse thing,
Right.
I
That was
think.
something that Brian Singer talked about with Brandon Routh when he was cast for Superman Returns. Was he asked him like, "Are you afraid of the Superman curse?" Which I guess for Brandon Routh it wasn't too bad. It was like we'll never get to do this in a movie again, but you can come back on the TV show.
Yeah, because the Superman curse up prior to that point was very interesting, and it wasn't what it is now. Where now it's just like this weird thing that happens where the Supermans just never get their ending, or at least until recently, because that was the thing that Tyler's Superman is the first one probably ever that finally got an ending, whereas the rest of them were just like that. But before that, the curse was that people were just straight up either dead or paralyzed. Like that's what it was. Like George Reeves has one of the most mysterious deaths in
Yeah.
Hollywood history, although people are pretty sure they know what happened at this point. It probably was just this, I'm not going to say it because I don't feel like bumming people out.
Don't spoil the movie Hollywoodland either. The good Ben Affleck movie where Ben Affleck plays the guy who plays Superman with
That is one of the
George Reeves.
funniest
But
things if you watch that movie, seeing Ben Affleck dressed the Superbad. And you're just like, oh, that's so weird, especially because it's pre Snyder stuff, so it's just really funny.
yeah.
If you guys have a chance, watch that. It's actually not a bad movie. But and then yeah, what happened with Christopher was just it was devastating, and but he took it in such an interesting way where like he still inspired people even after it happened. I'm crying. I already feel emotional. Again, I know what happened. I don't know why I feel emotional about it already, but I hear more about stuff that I didn't know about recently because of Talkville, the Smallville podcast that Tom
Right.
Welling and them do. I heard more about the episodes of Smallville that he did because he's only in like I think two of them,
Yeah.
and how he had like defied his nurses and stuff to try to stay on the set longer than everybody else, and that when they were making Superman Flyby, which for people who don't know is the J.J. Abrams movie that never ironically got off the ground. Uh, he was championing Tom Welling to be the Superman in that movie.
Oh,
And
cool. I didn't know about that. I remember there was kind of a movement of people in the early aughts who were like, yeah, they just need to let Tom Welling do Superman in the next Superman movie.
yeah, he was one of those guys because when he saw him in Smallville and talked to him and hung out with him, he's like, I think he could do it. Just give him the chance to do it. And of course they never did, but also that movie never got off the ground. But I think we're all the better for it, to be honest, based on what we've heard about that movie.
Yeah, you can. The entire script is online, and it is bonkers. It would not have been it would have been a very ambitious movie, but I don't think it would have been a very good movie.
No, if for people who don't know, he wanted Krypton to not have exploded. That
Or
was
only
like,
like partially explode, like it only like half blows up. It's still there. Like you can go back to it though.
yeah. Did you ever hear what the creator said about that?
Like the reasoning behind it.
No, that the creators of Smallville. What happened was that after that was the version of the script that was finalized, WB executives were like, "We want you to set it to where Krypton didn't explode in Smallville anymore,"
Oh well.
and they're like, "No, we're not. No, that's a terrible idea."
Well, Smallville was better for not being connected to that movie.
It almost was. It was that close. We just got lucky. The showrunners were like, "No, that's stupid. I'm not doing that."
Nuts.
We got
But
it would have been really funny though to change
speaking
your entire thing for a movie that never came out.
It's so weird with DC too because I just found out that the reason in My Adventures with Superman, they never call him Lex in season 1. He's always Alex. And that was because at the time the show was not allowed to use Lex for some
No,
reason, but they
they were
could in
told not
season
to,
2. Yeah.
and they did it as a joke. They were just like, we could do something with this guy, but who knows? And
But like,
everybody was like, "That's
why?
Lex, right?" And they were just like, "Who knows?" Like they,
But
they're
why
like,
did Warner
"That's
Brothers
Lex."
not want them to have Lex in there? Like, what would like? There was nothing going on anywhere else, right? I mean, I guess like Superman and Lois did some stuff with Lex, but I don't think that would have been the reason.
No one knows. No one knows how WB executive thinks. That's the reason why a lot of really bad decisions have been made over the years based on something using a character slightly the same.
It is so weird because going back to like Justice League Unlimited, the animated series, not the current comic coming out, but the Bruce Timm show, like they couldn't call Black Manta for some reason. They had to rename him Devil Ray because of it was because of that
It was the Aquaman
proposed
show,
Aquaman show that didn't get picked up. But
and then they couldn't use Batman villains in Justice League anymore because the Batman was airing at the time.
that was probably advantageous though. That shows some other corners of the DCU. But yeah, that is frustrating. Like it's all one company. I wish they wouldn't like tie the hands of the creators like that.
They just assume the audience is dumb, and I don't understand it.
Yeah, Warner Brothers executives do not understand their audience,
They really don't.
but speaking of Smallville, that was the original. I know it was the WB back then, but still, that was the original CW DC superhero show. Started this genre or subgenre, whatever you want to call it. Superman and Lois was the last. Ended it. I think when it I think it's clearly like the best of all the DC shows that were on that network.
In my opinion, it is. That's 100%. I know some people have the ones that they champion. A friend of mine, for instance, he champions Black Lightning as his favorite. And then I have another friend who champions, for some reason, the Flash. The reason I say for some reason is because the Flash got really bad. And then I know there's people who love Arrow the same way that way, but it all comes down to what you like, kind of thing. But for me, it's the best, not just Superman or not just best CW of those things, but probably one of the best live action Superman stuff ever made.
Yeah, that's a question that I want to ask. Maybe by the end of this stream, we'll give our answers. But do we think Superman and Lois is the best Superman show? But when did it premiered in 2021, right?
Yeah, it came out in 2021. It was right after Crisis on Infinite Earths had happened, which was a very ballsy thing for a TV show to do.
Yeah, and it was kind of that awkward where it started off and we kind of thought it was in the rest of the Arrowverse universe, but then apparently it wasn't. But it was weird because
Well,
you like
that was
watching
a last minute
Supergirl.
thing.
Yeah, yeah. But even on like Supergirl, like they would do like the fortress would look different on Supergirl than it looked on Superman and Lois, and there was like a few things like that. It always felt like not quite the same. So
No, yeah, but we all know now that it was supposed to be part of it, and
yeah,
there's very specific reasons that everybody knows now. Sorry, one of the biggest reasons is it was supposed to have a crossover with Batwoman, and then Batwoman was doing really badly, I guess, and then COVID happened, and so all of the filming of everything, they couldn't get people to be in its respective shows. I think it was the reason. It's one of the reasons why Tyler isn't in the last chunk of Supergirl, from what I hear, is that he was supposed to be, but they due to conflicting, because there was very specific guidelines for COVID. You had to go somewhere,
hmm
be there for a while, for what, like 2-3 weeks before you were even allowed to get outside of wherever you ended up,
yeah.
kind
They
of
would
thing.
quarantine. I think they called it pods. They would like different
Yeah,
productions would set up their pods, and you had to live and stay there. So it'd be hard to go out, be okay. I'm working on my show this week, and I'm going to go work on a different show next week, and then come back over here the week after. That was not allowed.
yeah. So that used to be how they were able to get so many of these crossovers to work the way they did, and so due to that, due to the Batman woman doing bad, even worse as time went on, and then it was slowly, it was obvious that they were going to dissipate the Arrowverse as a whole. They're like, screw it. This is no longer a thing. The greatest example in show that of it being two different things is really funny. It's Diggle. It's John Diggle, and it's
Right.
because of his look in the first season, and then his look in the end of the second season, if I remember correctly. because
Yeah,
he
he
goes
grew his
from
hair out.
yeah, he goes from like having that clean shaven or kind of look to
The
just like
arrow look.
dreads or something. Like I don't remember. I don't know how to describe it because I don't know enough about hairstyles because I'm bald. I've been bald for a long time. But the way his hair was, like you said, it grew out and it was like way more out there. Like just to be like, this is a different Diggle. Just all of a sudden, they decide to try to be like, this is different. I swear. Like, okay, I trust you on that. Even though you said Oliver's name in season one, so
Oh, I didn't
I'll
even
just tell you.
realize that.
Yeah, he
Huh.
says Oliver. He talks about Oliver in the first season when he's like, yeah, Oliver came back or something, simple like that, and then just that's why if you watch that season, you're like, they definitely were not supposed to be different originally,
Right.
and then at the last second, they're like, okay, now it's completely different, and it's like a throwaway line in either the end of the first season or the beginning of the second season,
Yeah, I think it was in
where
season 2. It's Sam Lane. He says that
yeah, he's like he's the only super powered being in the universe
yeah,
or something like
he's
that.
the only hero in our. He says something like, "I've seen the multiverse, and here on our world, he's the only hero that we have. Some other worlds have multiple heroes, but we just got one."
Yeah, and then that's why it was like, this is okay, sure. That was the moment everybody was like, oh, this is different because the setup is there, and at the end of Crisis, if you guys watch Crisis, before Crisis, Clark and Lois have one kid. It's a baby. It's a baby Jonathan, and then after Crisis ends, he gets a call from Lois. He's like, "Hey, there's something. I need you to come back. There's something going on with the twins." And he stops. He's like, "Did you just say twins?" She's like, "Yeah, our twins." They never say if they're adults. They never say if they're babies either. We just now know that he has twins
Right.
instead. And then, so as far as we know, that was supposed to be the original version. This was supposed to be the original connection of that. Was now that the universe has changed. Now he lives in this universe with everybody. And then they just decided, nah. And I find that fascinating that even could happen. I find it absolutely fascinating that could even happen.
And I'll say like the one thing that I guess I dislike about Superman and Lois is that it is just a Superman story. He is isolated. There are other heroes, but they're all like the very Superman adjacent characters, like Steel or his kids become Superboys, and stuff like that. But you never get to see him interact within like that superhero community. So in that sense, I kind of compare it to Spider-Man's great show, the animated Spectacular Spider-Man, a fantastic show. I love that to death. I wish that it had gone on longer because it was so perfect for what I want from the character. Except the one thing that it never got to do was show Spidey interact with the larger superhero community. They never had any of the other characters. It was only Spider-Man characters.
Well, it reminded me back of what we used to get, which was that was always what the show was. Like the Flash from when John Wesley Shipp was the Flash. He was
Mm-hmm.
Barry Allen, but there was nobody else. It was the same with Small or not Smallville, because Smallville did actually have multiple people. But a lot of those cartoons, a lot of cartoons, even the movies, a lot of the live action movies, they were one universe, one hero, no one else existed. We would make a joke or something. Like George Clooney's Batman makes a Superman joke in his movie where he's like,
Yeah.
this is why Superman works alone or some shit like that. You're like, does that mean Superman exists in this world? Like they're like weird teases, but there's never a moment where they're like, and then I called up Clark to be like, hey, how's your day going or something. Whereas the Arrowverse was the first time that I feel like shows did that in a way, because or not shows, but you know what I mean, like superhero shows, because that sounds like especially live action ones, because I know Spider-Man the Animated Series kind of did it, sort
Yeah,
of.
they had the X-Men show up on Spider-Man one time.
Yeah,
So,
but Arrowverse did it in a way where it was like everything connected. If you were watching an episode of Arrow, there's a crossover that involves them, Flash, you know, the was Legends of Tomorrow, those sort of thing. Like you knew what it was the MCU in small pocket form is was almost what it felt like.
yeah, it was the CW's MCU.
And so we got spoiled. So you would see you would see Green Arrow hang out with the Flash. You'd see the Flash hang out with Supergirl. You'd see Supergirl hang out with like fucking the one of the Legends of Tomorrow or something. Like, and so I was looking forward to seeing Superman hang out with these people because whenever he did, I loved it. I was a huge fan of whenever he did. And then all of a sudden he was, like you said, it was a bummer that he just he just wasn't allowed to. Like they just there's never a moment where like the Flash shows up and he's like, "Hey, do you need help with something?" Like there's so many episodes throughout the show that would been solved if for the Flash existed or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we did get to see Tyler Hoechlin's Superman work alongside, other superheroes and the crossovers with Crisis and stuff. But that was technically, I guess, like a different universe than the guy we're following in
Yeah, it
this
was
show.
Arrowverse
So,
Superman. Because in fact, I
right.
was just talking to somebody on Reddit about this because they had made a post going, "I wonder what that guy's up to," because he's a different. Because that guy, that version of Superman, he was clean shaven the whole time. You remember that? He used to always be clean
He
shaven.
didn't have like the 5 o'clock shadow.
Yeah, that's what really
Hmm.
sets the two apart outside of his suit. Was he was always clean shaven in the Arrowverse, like proper.
I didn't notice that, but yeah, maybe they did that deliberately to make him look like a little bit more mature now as like dad Superman, as like dad with teenage kids.
There's two reasons. One is that. The other one is because apparently Tyler's beard grows super fast.
Yeah, I always assumed that was the case too, that it was just more practical.
The man used to be a teen wolf.
He also he played college baseball, I guess, and considered going pro, but
Oh, that would have been interesting.
because when they talk about like young Clark on the show, they point out like I really wanted to play baseball when I was in high school, and when Jonathan is wanting to play football. I guess he does play football in the first season, but I guess we can go ahead and get into like the full on spoiler talk. But I just want to like comment on the show's ability to constantly catch me off guard and surprise me with some like really amazing twists and turns. When we read a lot of the source material and we're so like up to date on a lot of these popular storylines, we can kind of see things coming, when they're doing these adaptations, and you'll kind of be like, "Oh, I've read this comic. I have an idea of what's going to happen next." And even like when there's like scenes lifted from comics, like Superman and Lois does do that, like with the nice costume. Oh, thanks, my mom made it for me. With that was out of Superman for All Seasons, right? And
Yeah.
the Atom Man, I believe the Nazi villain that he's fighting, that was from Superman Smashes the Clan. The Atom Man, right? Is what he's called.
I forgot the specific character's name, but yeah, he's more prominently known for that. I think he might have maybe existed before that, but his specific design was definitely
Right.
based on that.
So it does like pull some of those like really specific things, but then it'll hit you with like such like a twist and turn. Like going back to season 1 immediately, we think we're following this cool Lex Luthor from another universe, and then we find out like, oh no, this is a John Henry Irons from another universe. That was a great reveal.
It was one of the greatest reveals, not just because of that, but I remember telling you this after we were talking about with the episode where it's revealed is called Man of Steel, and it never occurred to me that was foreshadowing.
Mm-hmm.
It's
And
amazing.
then they hit you with that the first time, and then you don't even realize that they do it like again almost immediately after that with Morgan Edge.
Yes, the Morgan Edge thing. It consistently did it. That was what I loved about the show is it would show me something, and my superhero reading brain was like, oh well, this is obviously this, and then at the last second, it's like nope, like Morgan Edge. You're like, oh, it's just Morgan Edge. Like he's just some fucking businessman, and then it did something that I did not expect with giving Superman a character that doesn't exist in anything. Like he has a half brother.
Right. Tal Rowe, who I guess they've only ever used in Superman and Lois. They haven't tried to incorporate him into the comics yet, as far as I know, or anything else. But I do wonder if anyone else will ever try to play around with that concept that Superman had. It they make him a half brother, so he's still like the last son of the House of El. He has a different dad, but
Yeah, which I found fascinating. The idea that on Krypton people could get like divorced essentially on Krypton because that like it's not it was never unheard. It's so unheard of on anything Kryptonian at all. The idea that like yeah, I used to be with this guy and it sucked, and so I left him for your father, and now and it's like wait what? You
we
can
were
do that on
just
Krypton?
we were talking about Superman Flyby, and I remember now. I was saying you can find that script online. There was a version of that script where Lex Luthor is a guy working for the CIA, who's like he's like tracking Clark or something, and then like halfway through the movie he starts flying. He's like, oh, by the way, I'm from Krypton also. And it sounded like a ridiculous idea in Superman Flyby, but Superman and Lois kind of did that with Morgan Edge. He was just like, oh, by the way, I'm your brother from Krypton, I have all your powers. It's like, what? Like, I didn't see that coming, but they did some fun stuff with that.
It still blows my mind that is the twist of that episode, that season to this day. Like and then I'm shocked how much I liked his character after that.
Yeah, I almost thought that might ruin the like when it happened, I was like, "Oh, this is a ballsy move. I don't know how I'm going to feel about it though." But then when I saw it play out, I was like, "Oh, that actually didn't break anything." It was almost kind of like when the comics gave him a kid. I'm like, "Can you really like change the status quo that much?" And then like, "Oh, apparently you can. You get some really great stories out of that."
Yeah, and then it made the plot that was going on that much more interesting because of it. Because before it just seemed like a businessman going out of his way to mess with forces he didn't understand, but instead it was a Kryptonian who was messing with forces he sort of understood. And that somehow was more interesting to me, especially with the fact that what happens with the Zod thing they did, and the not the climax, but like the second. I call it the first climax of it, or because you remember there's the fight between him and John Henry because he's being controlled by like a Zod phantom or something like that.
Yeah, and they're trying to possess Kryptonians into humans, which was
Yeah,
that
he
was an
was
idea
missing.
I always thought they should do something with like because of the Phantom Zone because like Krypton's has like I always thought they should like do something like that in the comics. So I was like, oh man, the show is like taking like the ideas that I always wanted to see in the comics.
And I love that for some reason it tied it all to Smallville itself. They're like for some reason Smallville specifically has is predisposed for this weird idea and it introduced a new version of Kryptonite that was it called XK, if I remember
Right? Yeah,
correctly.
the X Kryptonite from the so the Schuster mines or the Siegel mines. I know like they named
I
like
think
the
it's the Schuster mines, if I remember
yeah
correctly.
they named the
But
mines after one of the creators.
and the weirdest side effect I'd ever heard, which is that you can inhale X kryptonite if you're from Smallville and become superpowered.
Yeah, and that gave us that storyline with Jonathan and juicing up to play football and all of that stuff. But I really liked the way that they handled like all of like the high school teeny bopper drama worked so much better on Superman and Lois than in Smallville, in my opinion, because that was the kids doing that, and you could like cut away to the adults.
Yeah, their melodrama made sense because it was confined to them. There was never a moment where, and whenever it did affect Clark and Lois, it was the way it affects any parent when they find out their son is doing drugs or their son is accused of selling said drugs, kind of thing. Like it's, they were like, I'm mad and I'm disappointed. Like all the things a parent has to go through, especially when the town turns on them because of what Jonathan has essentially done.
Oh, when he tanks the football program.
Yeah, and the coach just fucking hates Jonathan for like the rest of time, and it's so funny.
Coach Gaines is one of the best recurring characters in that show. They created some really cool original characters, but they got like a lot of good humor out of that guy.
Yeah, it was always really funny because he would just give him the hardest time, but a lot of the times it's because he cared, but he was just upset that he lost being. But they still called him Coach Gaines, even though he wasn't really a coach anymore after a certain point.
That's a very like small town thing. That's something that like I really relate to Superman and Lois a lot is like someone who's from like a little rural town and just like when he moved back and he's like he goes to the high school game and there's like oh wow like there's like half his kids in band at halftime that like there used to be like no one's like really like participating in the community like people have moved out of town because like there's no jobs and everyone who's still here is like poor and hooked on meth or whatever. It's like, man, that is some finger on the pulse type stuff. That is exactly how I feel when I go back to my hometown.
Oh, the first season is great about that, and then it introduces Kyle, who's is also
Kyle Cushing, yeah,
an original character who you hate immediately in the first season, and because
totally.
he's the hometown guy who's like clinging to the hometown in like a sad way. You know what I mean? Like, and it's not because he means to be mean. It's just that he's just like, this is my town, go fuck yourself, kind of thing. And so, like, and then you soften towards him because you find out more about him, and then you hate him again because he did something really fucking stupid.
But like that desperation, that kind of desperation that I think a lot of us find relatable in this day and age. Uh, but like he wants to believe in Morgan Edge is like going to come into the community and bring jobs and stuff, and like put all of his faith in like this genius billionaire is going to come fix all of our problems. It's like I know so many people like that just here living like in Austin, Texas. Like people who like want to praise Elon Musk and his Tesla factory here, which just had like a bunch of layoffs. It's like a nationwide talking point right now that like Elon Musk is laying off his workers to bring in cheaper labor from overseas. It's like, but it's like that desperation that drives a lot of people to buy into this propaganda. And
Yeah, exactly. And I wouldn't be surprised if Elon Musk was trying to force phantoms into people in the citizens of Bastrop.
Jesus Christ, I
I'm
do
just
not want
saying.
a Morgan Edge reveal with him. I do not want that to be the case.
That would be the
But
funniest thing ever. But and yeah, we've just touched season one. The Lana Lang stuff going on in the middle of that too, and
oh,
a
I love
very
that the show
interesting
you.
version of Lana.
I like Lana. I'm a fan of Lana in the. I've liked her ever since I saw Superman 3 as a kid and fell in love with Annette O'Toole. Uh, that is not a great movie, but there's some good stuff in it.
Yeah,
I really like that the show like used her, and they did some interesting things. Like she becomes mayor of the town.
yeah. She starts out as just like a housewife to Kyle. Has two kids, a daughter who's difficult sometimes, and a daughter who sometimes you just don't see for whole episodes of a television show.
I don't even. Sarah is like the main kid, and then like the little girl though. I don't even remember her. That was actually like a plot point, and it was like, oh, we just forgot her somewhere.
Yeah, it was a meme on the Reddit where we would start making up shit about her, like she's gonna be the secret mastermind behind something or something because you don't see her for long periods of time. It was
That was
really funny.
that was gonna be season 5. They set up Milton Fine in season 4. Like, oh, is he gonna be Brainiac next year? But like, no, it was gonna be the little Cushing girl. It was gonna be Brainiac.
That would have been so funny.
I mean, it is the show of constant misdirection. So if anyone was gonna do it, it would have been Superman and Lois.
I'm trying to remember what her name was. Was it Sophie?
I think you're right. I think Sophie. Yeah, Sophie.
I'm just gonna go with that because it's been so. I generally don't remember her name.
Either Cushing or Cortez. They. I
Well,
guess like
Cushing was Kyle's name.
right.
Was because they had Cushing's the Kyle's, which is such a weird name. Especially because it turns out he was the Latino, I think, of the two.
Yeah, that was like the season 2 reveal was like another reveal they had. We're like, oh, we cast too white of a show, so we're gonna make one of our characters Latino.
It was so weird. It was a very strange reveal. And then Sarah and Jordan's relationship was painful for many
Yeah,
reasons. And I don't mean that as in like, oh, I hated the two of them together so much as that I hated how Jordan reacted to their relationship at times because Jordan this is the thing. I want to talk about the kids now. I want to talk about Jordan and Jonathan. Jordan was interesting because they were portraying mental illness in a character who now has superpowers. Like he's a very anxious kid, prone to panic attacks. Like he didn't know what to do with himself half the time, and all of a sudden, this kid now has superpowers, and now he has a girlfriend, and so he doesn't know how to react to any of it. And so that was very interesting, but it was also maddening because he would make very weird decisions, but you couldn't really. But you understood why he made a lot of those decisions because he was just an awkward guy. He didn't know any better still, and you're watching him learn better, of course, but you're also watching him make some weird fucking decisions.
yeah, but I think he really did embody that kind of that awkward angstiness that like a lot of us like we're actually like not great people making great choices when we're that age. So
Yeah, and that's the reason why I never completely faulted Jordan for what happens in that show. There's some really weird writing when it comes to what Sarah does on her end. there's the summer camp thing where she comes back and she's like, I kissed a girl when I was there, and then it becomes a whole thing for a little bit, and then so that divided a lot of people because of how they both reacted to that happening, and so that was the main teen drama when it came to that. The drama when it came to relationship drama, it was mostly the two of them, and then Jonathan's side was more about being the non-super, at least in the first chunk of it, being the golden child that everybody was great because he was the big football star. He had a great life in Metropolis, and then now he's in this small town. Nobody really looks up to him that way. They don't want to give him a chance. He then finds out he's the son of the world's greatest superhero, but he got nothing out of it.
Hmm.
And so you're watching him deal with that, as well as as trying to shortcut his way past it, which is what happens with the XK thing. He has a girlfriend that just, I don't know what their idea was with that girlfriend. It's the only part of the show I'm not a fan of, is his girlfriend, who kept getting him in trouble as the show went on. And because he still stayed with her even after a lot of fucked up shit happens.
The trailer park girl, not the first one from Metropolis that dumps him, but like the
No,
second
the other
one that he
one,
had.
yeah, from Central City, who just like he gets him kicked out of the football thing. He takes the blame for it. He gets his ass beat multiple times for this thing. Gets his truck stolen.
Eventually ends up outing his dad. Like her dad is the one who like outs him as
Yeah,
Superman to the entire, like, changed world history
like
basically.
this, like all because she dated this one dude, and it's just
Yeah.
like it's fascinating that they just stayed together that whole time. Like anybody else would have written this where they broke up after a while, but instead they stayed together for like the most of the rest of the show for the most part, outside of it, I'm assuming the ending. And then so it's just fascinating that's what happens with that. And but then they do something interesting where they, at the last minute, they're like, and then Jonathan has a very emotional moment, and his powers unlock, and it's this great. He has this amazing character arc of like earning earning the humanity of Superman, and once he becomes the Superboy of that, he is now the more human of the two of them, if that makes sense. Because that's what I always found interesting about
Mm.
the two boys, is that Jonathan already had the humanity that Superman has, where Jordan is earning the humanity that Clark already has, because he was so anxious and so out of it that he never had that warmth to him, is a good way of putting it. But by the end of it, the two of them have both, and I thought that was really good.
That was another good twist, because in the first episode, you kind of think, okay, if either of these kids is going to be super powered, it's going to be Jonathan. It's going to be the athlete, right? And they even, like, they gave him the name of Jonathan, of Superboy from the comics at the time. Where there's only one kid instead of twins. So it really did kind of, or at least me when I was watching it, it really did get me thinking, like, okay, Jonathan's going to have powers, right? And then I was surprised when it was revealed to be Jordan. And they made us wait a long time for the Jonathan stuff, but I'm so glad that they got that in there for the fourth and final season.
It is a bummer that they did switch, but I generally, this is gonna sound bad, but I generally think the second Jonathan is a better Jonathan. But I don't know what it is. It's just, I think it's because they really do look more related.
He does look more like his dad and brother, but also they gave him more stuff to do. I think the actor had a wider range of things to do, especially in the fourth season where you throw in the superpowers. But
There's also a lot of rumors about behind the scenes stuff when it comes to the other one, the other original Jonathan. I don't mean as like him being a bad guy, but I mean as like he never really gelled with the rest of the crew. And it's obvious when you look at behind the scenes photos, because Alex Garfin, the guy who plays Jordan, he used to
mhm.
post all the time about him hanging out with the crew, like pictures of him with the cast. And Jordan Elias was never in any of them. Like he was never in any of these photos, like being like, "Hey, it's us having fun," in the background and stuff. And then once they got the other Jonathan, that guy was in all of those photos,
Okay.
like the same way everybody else was. But
Michael
until
Bishop is the new
yes,
guy.
the new guy,
Okay.
and he's great. And I think the crew just gelled with him better. and it just worked out a lot. But the other guy was just really good at drama. With Jordan Elias, he was really, really good at the drama, and it's one of the only things I missed about him than Michael Bishop, if that makes sense.
Speaking of the cast, we haven't talked about Lois Lane much, but we have Elizabeth Tulloch as Lois,
Yes, she
or
is
Bitsy.
so
That's her nickname is Bitsy, right?
yeah,
Bitsy Tulloch.
and she is so fucking good as Lois Lane. Her and Tyler have like I know like I borderline thought they were together at times because of their chemistry just being off the goddamn charts, man. Like it was just, and she's wonderful. She plays the scenes of being the take no shit reporter whenever things come up, but also being the caring mother
Mm-hmm.
as well as being the caring wife of and being like a neglected daughter at times by Sam, and like she had so much range when it came to everything she had to do, and then season 3 really solidified how good she of an actress she is, because she had a very emotional storyline, and the fact that she just died, the Lois, the character, is diagnosed with breast cancer and has to deal with that in season 3, and she plays it beautifully. She easily could have half-assed it in a way to try to like the way it could have been super melodramatic is the best way of putting it, and it just isn't. And she's flawless at the entire series.
I feel like so much thought and effort and care went into season 3 specifically, and like that cancer storyline. I was thinking like, okay, one of these writers has like they've either gone through breast cancer or was married to someone who did, or like talked to someone who did. But it just it rang so true, and that was where the show like really got to me. I cried so hard during season 3. And it's so like I lost my mom to cancer a few years ago, so it definitely like stirred up a lot of those feelings. It just Superman and Lois, it surprised me that it constantly it feels like the most relatable Superman show to me. Just it just the stories, the plots just connect to things in my life. Just the same thing I was talking about, seeing your what's going on with like your hometown, your home small town these days. But then like with the cancer mom storyline, that was another one of those classic Superman and Lois twists and turns when it's like, oh no, it looks like she's pregnant, and she goes to the doctor, and you're like, are they gonna do the TV show thing where after a few seasons you add another kid, you do like a pregnancy or something, and then nope, it's not a pregnancy, it is cancer.
It was crazy, and then it ties into the overall story in a weird, interesting way as well, because she makes a friend throughout it, and then that friend turns out to be a fucking supervillain. And it's just fascinating that is where they went with that. And
Which
when
there's so much to
seasons,
compliment on all of that stuff that you're bringing up, because they're doing this reinterpretation of a Green Arrow villain,
yeah,
but they're also bringing in a classic Superman villain with Bruno Mannheim.
and then the season ends in a way that I did not expect. Like no, I don't want to skip season 2 because but before we do, I want to just explain to you guys just how right he is about the personal problems that the characters deal with, is because I brought this up off mic, which is that every Eververse show's version of drama was very was strange. Like when it came to Barry's family, where they're just like, oh my god, so and so has superpowers and they're keeping it secret or something like that. They're always very fantastical when it came to it, or it was something that could be fixed if they just had a conversation, type of thing. And then, or in Arrow's case, like just weird, fucked up shit that no one would have as like their problem kind of thing. Oh, I used to murder people, like that kind of personal problem. Whereas Superman and Lois was just like yeah, I've gone back to my small town, and this was not that long. Like this was a long time ago, and I had the exact same thing. And I have a lot of friends on Facebook who are still in that small town, and they talk about it pretty much damn near the same way as Superman and Lois talks about it. And then season 2 also has these great moments of drama that involve the like family drama. Like, hey, your mom after mom died. You know, you drift those characters drift. Sam Lane drifted away. A lot changed between the lanes. That like to trying to get forgiveness from a family member, trying to keep them out of trouble, that sort of thing. Like a lot of very realistic issues that come up. Season 3, of course, we mentioned what season 3's was, and season 4 was just like, oh shit. It was like about grief and so much more, and it's just like there's so much of the drama was so real. And then we not even brought up the Cushing's drama. The Cushing's also had a lot of dramas, people cheating on each other, people like having to figure out who they are, that sort of thing. There's something real about Superman and Lois, is the best way of putting it.
Yeah, yeah, it rings true. Which, Superman, that's one of the things he stands for, right? With truth, justice. So it's the first thing he stands for is truth.
Yeah, and it's amazing. And then like I said, I don't want to skip season 2. But season 2, Bizarro, chef's kiss.
I loved Bizarro. Season 2 is probably my least favorite season overall of the 4, but I absolutely love how they handled Bizarro. And I even like the Bizarro world stuff. But just like they made Bizarro scary when he's talking in the creepy reverse language, and like they made like the ice eyes scary, and yeah, they had a lot of respect for Bizarro. That was well done.
Yeah, season 2 is also my least favorite, not because it's a bad season, but because the first half of it's so much better than the second half of it. And it has to do with Bizarro, because it does the same thing we mentioned earlier, where it was a fake out, where you were seeing this thing crawl out of the ground and wearing like some sort of containment suit of some kind. So you're
Yeah,
like,
it was straight up the Dan Jurgens Doomsday suit from Death of Superman.
So you're like, that's clearly Doomsday, and which I'll get back to be honest. And then he out pops out Bizarro, and what I loved how they did what they did was that every time they filmed the Bizarro scenes, they never made like a reverse S suit. It's just the normal Superman suit. All they did was they reversed the footage of the of what his movements were. So they just mirrored it. So it had the backwards S. So his hair is even backwards because of it. And so like and his mannerisms are backwards because they're just doing everything in this weird reverse footage kind of way, and it's fucking awesome the entire way through. Like, it's so cool. You're just like, how did you make this work? Like, I love this so much. And he looked amazing. He's the only version of Bizarro that just feels like Bizarro, in my opinion. Like, I've seen Bizarros and other stuff outside of Superman animated series, but that one was like, that was a defective clone. Now, this is like a guy from an alternate reality. Everything's the exact opposite, and he looks horrifying. And that scene where what's his name, the captain that took over for General Lane, he's named after the kid from the Death of Superman. I forgot his name off the top of my head, but he had that like super core.
Oh, yeah, the guy who dies in the
Yeah, he sends out those guys that have superpowers to go confront this thing, even though Clark's like, don't fucking go confront it. And it turns into like a horror movie where Bizarro just fucking wipes the floor with these guys. Like, it's scary. Like, Bizarro is terrifying. And then the second half, the problem I had with the second half is it becomes more about the parasite, the woman who becomes Parasite. And she's just not as scary. But goddamn, that finale is still really cool. When Superbad saves the day, you're just like, oh my god, that was so cool. And then it ends, and it's such an interesting way.
She was just unfortunately the weakest villain of the show, compared to like Bruno Mannheim and Lex Luthor and.
Well, she was terrifying in a real way, and by that, but not in a way that's like, does Superman take care of this? Because before she's more like a what's the word I'm looking for? A con artist kind of thing. Like, she's scamming people for money, but it turns out she's right.
She's like a self-help speaker who becomes a cult leader.
Yeah, and so she's scary in that in a realistic way, but then when she becomes Parasite, she's supposed to be scary in a fantastical way. It's not as effective, especially after seeing how awesome Bizarro was and these great fight scenes that you get with Bizarro. And it's just I guess this is fine.
And they try
And
to
then
tie that into like the human side of things, you know, with like Lois having the whole storyline with her sister Lucy, and like Lucy fell for this
yeah,
cult and everything. But like if you compare that to how what you were just talking about in season 3, how they tie things in with the human side of things with Onomatopoeia, or I think what was it? Pia was her real name,
I
Bruno's
forgot.
wife.
Yeah, I forgot what her real name was in the show. Let me
But
look it
like
up
that
real
just
quick.
that works so much better than what they did in season 2 with that.
Yeah, Paya, I think Paya Mannheim or Pia Mannheim. But no, all that stuff works a lot better. What I'll say about each season is each season has pretty much has an episode that's a giant chunk of flashback. Because the first
Hmm.
season has that great episode that shows the beginning of their romance, or him showing up as Superman, the beginning of their romance, and up until where they get the kids, and it turns out it's the reveal is it's Tauro. Keep like looking at Clark's memories, and then the second episode has this fucking phenomenal Bizarro origin story episode. That's just about like Bizarro's life in Bizarro World, how it all went wrong, and because of this one lady, and how he went from being their champion to just essentially becoming like a kryptonite drug addict kind of thing by the time it's done, and it's fucking phenomenal. And then it ends with him showing up at what he does at the beginning of that season, and it's got this great hallway fight scene. That's
Oh
two of
yeah,
them technically, and they're so fucking cool.
I love that song too. That tried and true song that like
Yeah,
I listen to that all the time. It's on my playlist of frequent listens.
but I know season 4 has one sort of as well because of the when Sam's thing where it's showing Sam's life involving Lois and Clark as well, and it's also a great, like, it's not as much as the other ones, but it's like you see him getting the reveal of finding out who Clark is, all that stuff. Like, it does such a good job at humanizing everything, but using the past, like using scenes in a way that you're just like, I would love the fact that you're showing me this. I wish that, we'd saw it in an actual episode, but we're past that point because you've done this great montage to show where we are now. But it made the world feel that much more lived in.
It would be a lot of fun to go and cut out all of the flashback stuff and edit all of it together. We even got like that Jimmy Olsen stuff in season 4. There's a lot of stuff they were still doing as late as season 4, as far as like backstory.
Yeah, and then I know there's some in season 3. It's like a flashback of like Lois going to like a gala to get a journalism award
Right.
that we find out caused a very specific thing to happen. But there's so much going on in the show that's just like, it's phenomenal what they were able to do, and it had so much more that they wanted to do, and they just never, and we're never going to see it, and that
But
bums me out.
even though it was limited to like a network show budget, well, I think HBO co-funded the show.
They
So
co-funded apparently some of it, but I think after a while it was just the CW.
yeah,
I
because I know
think
they had budgetary issues towards the end, but
that's one of the reasons why they got canceled, is that the CW is just like, we just don't want to spend the money on this anymore, because I think they're shifting towards reality shows.
right, which is cheaper, and that's like David Zaslav's bread and butter from the Discovery days, I guess. That dude really sucks. It sucks that we're stuck with him, uh, but even
So
that being said, they still were able to do like a lot of like really big, fantastical, high budget ideas, like show Bizarro World, and that all looked beautiful.
yeah, and they did a really good interest. They did an interesting job showing how different everybody was. I think the one that made me laugh out loud was they're like, Sam Lane, you've always been the greatest father. Like, you've always been there for us. I lost my shit when they
They
said
did
that.
him wrong.
It was so funny. Oh my god, they're just yeah, you've always been there for us ever since I was a kid, and we're just like, oh my god, this is so fucked up.
Apparently, he was a better family man in Natasha's universe also because she talked about how like, oh yeah, we used to like watch all these movies together, and then like this one had like no idea what she was talking about. He was like, oh, I was just taking you to the movies to try to recruit you into the uh 7-3 or I guess it was
I think they changed the name at that point because it was like
yeah
hell before that, it's spelled backwards with numbers.
yeah 7734 the calculator thing, which they took from Jeff Johns' Action Comics did that.
They did, and Sam Lane. This is gonna sound funny, but this Sam Lane is still the most I've ever liked Sam Lane in live action,
No,
pretty
I
much
agree
ever. Oh my god, he's so
because it
good.
because this show is so family focused. You know, this is Superman as a dad, Lois as a mom. So you get Sam Lane as a grandpa, and it was like you can imagine the backstory to this of like, oh, he probably didn't get along with Clark at first, but then when he's like, okay, this guy is the father of my grandchildren, I'm gonna have to like forge a relationship with them, and you kind of see like they develop like this partnership and respect for each other because of the family circumstances.
And then he doesn't know how to navigate being a grandpa to them because there's a lot of moments he makes a lot of really bad decisions throughout the
Yeah.
show. One of them is the one that you mentioned where it turns out he was getting closer to Natasha purely to recruit them. The one that I think of the most, which I get where he's coming from, is the one where he tells the kids, "Stop calling your dad. Just fucking stop." Like he's saving the day. Like deal
Yeah,
with your
leave
own
him
shit.
alone. Like,
Yeah,
he's
deal with
got
your
he's
own
got an
bullshit.
important job to do.
Yeah, and you're like, I get where you're coming from, but that was a really bad thing you just told him. It was a really interesting moment where Lois is just like, "Yeah, you're not allowed to talk to the boys."
The guy sucked at like human interaction. Like, you know, he had to get his grandkid teach him how to use online dating, and then like that didn't work out well for him. He got like catfished and kidnapped immediately.
That was really funny, but there's so much about the Sam Lane that I liked, like, even because you see the humanity in him. He went and he focused on his job when his wife died. His kid suffered for it,
Hmm.
and now because of it, he doesn't know how to really be that much of a parent, even a grandparent, because he's a military man who's but he's like a normal guy, and unlike like when you watch Smallville, Sam Lane, and it's fucking Michael Ironside, you're like, I'm scared of that guy. Like no one should talk to that guy. Whereas this Sam Lane's like, okay, he's a normal guy, but he has a thought process that he doesn't understand what he did wrong. He's a boomer, is the best way of putting it. He's a military
Yeah,
boomer.
yeah, and the way that the actor Dylan Walsh played him, like he had like a lot of moments of like vulnerability where you know you could tell like, oh yeah, this is a guy who is uncomfortable being vulnerable, yet like he's got a lot to be vulnerable about. He's got a lot of weaknesses that get exposed over the course of the show. He has like a cool ending though, the way that they actually they end his story arc with his death, and then the thing that they did with the heart. How do you feel about like all the heart transplanting stuff in season 4?
Yeah, let's talk about season 4 now because season 3 ended in a way I did not anticipate, where it turns out the fake out became the real thing, where Buzaro turned into Doomsday, and season 4 did the ballsiest thing. And I don't mean that in the sense that doing the death of Superman last season because they didn't know it was the last season at the time. I mean it's because it's a different version of that story where he dies and he doesn't come back the way you know it does and everything else. So they put him in a chamber and he got healed and now he's back. They did that Sam Lane thing is such an interesting way of bringing him back, and then adding on top of that the fact that like him having a human heart means he's slowly becoming a normal person. Like that's super ballsy. And then the way it ends with that is super ballsy. But the fact that we got that Sam Lane thing at all is a miracle because that guy Dylan Walsh didn't want to come back. He because due to the budget cuts, every actor who used to be a recurring character for the most part was demoted down to like guest at most, I think was the idea. So they could only have them for a specific amount of time, and he didn't want to do it at all after that point. He's like, I don't really want to, but I think they like begged him to come back so they could finish the storyline. And I think they did a great job with the amount of time they had with him, and it's emotional because we've been following this guy for 3 seasons, and then that last episode does the thing that it's basically the way animes do it, where they're like when they die, they show us a lot of like backstory stuff. And that's what they did to Sam. And I'm like, I remember watching the episode going, "Oh, Sam's going to die," and I felt really bad that that's what was going to happen. But then, and then when it happens, he uses what's like a serum or something that he had that they inject, and then it lets his heart be usable for Clark, and it was such a heartfelt thing, and I would pun intended, and it worked. It all worked for me.
And it was also a good way to nerf your Superman when you're like, okay, we're gonna start establishing these other super powered people. The kids have powers now. You're gonna have like some Superboy backup, but it's like, oh, by the way, like you're not gonna be able to overexert yourself like you used to. It's something that it would have annoyed me if that was in like the first season of the show. Like, why can't I get like, super powered Superman who can just like cut loose and be as strong as I want him to be? But the way that they saved that for season 4, like it made me accept it a lot more. And knowing that it was the final season, I was like, okay, y'all can do whatever kind of like weird depictions of the character you want to do. I know like this is going to be unique to this show, and then next year I'll be watching the movie that James Gunn is doing. It's not gonna last. There's not gonna be like a long-term constant, and do your whatever you want to do with your version of the character. And it worked out quite well, I think. I know that this wasn't the original plan for it to be the final season, but it allowed us to have like that ending where they give Superman like that mortality, that very human ending.
It also was a great way. It was another realistic problem, which is that one day you're just gonna get slower, and it's sure it was forced on him. I feel like the funny thing is that this was one of the reasons I related to it is because when I was in my early 20s, I had like most people, we had a very large metabolism that was like, I can do whatever I want. I got into a real nasty car accident in my early 20s, and then I couldn't do it anymore. And so I had this, so it accidentally, or not, I say accidentally only because most people don't have this, but I had the same. I felt like I was having the same thing as Clark did in that moment, which is that all of a sudden I no longer was the guy, if that makes sense. And so for me, that I accidentally connected with that, even though like that probably wasn't their intention. And I think that's fascinating that can even happen. And then the fact that like that was their return storyline, I think is so interesting. I'm always curious what the plan would have been if they hadn't had gotten canceled. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, like clearly something Brainiac related, because they kind of would always sprinkle in the next season villain. Like we started seeing Bruno Mannheim at the end of season 2, right? And then Lex originally shows up in season 3. Like he gets out of prison in season 3.
Yeah.
So I think like the Milton Fine setup was to do something with Brainiac in season 5. But before we talk about like the ending of the show, though, because we're kind of like dancing around like the big finale, but we should comment on Lex Luthor in the show. One of my favorite depictions of the character.
He is the most terrifying version of Lex Luthor I've ever seen.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Like, because a lot of like I'm the reason I say that, guys, is if you haven't seen the show, if and please do, is that most Lex Luthors are one of two things. They're either a mad scientist or they are a businessman. Usually, they're rarely ever between. Or there's the third option is they're for some reason they're really obsessed with real estate scams, but that's different.
Yeah.
But the thing about this Lex Luthor is this was a Lex Luthor that had nothing to lose, and I thought that was fascinating when he first shows up. Is that he looks like something in a Sons of Anarchy when he first shows up. He's just wearing this like not leather jacket, but like just some like a what like you would see a biker wearing what he's wearing, and he's got this crazy beard and just threatens you so hard, and it was terrifying. And then especially with his plan that does work, all of his stuff works out for the most part, and it's terrifying because he's just like, yeah, I have nothing to lose, and you have everything to lose, and I'm gonna do everything in my power. And it's fucking scary how far he's willing to go.
But yeah, they give him like that cool ex-con look. And I was getting like kind of weirded out by all like we've gotten a lot of like Luthor with a beard lately. Like that's become like really popular, I guess. I know like the show I didn't even see it, but I know like the show Titans did that and Supergirl did that. And
Yeah.
then here I was like, do we really need like Lex to like have like a beard? I kind of want him to be like, you know, the clean shaven, bald headed guy that he is in the show. But I ended up like liking it so much that like when it weirded me out when he did finally shave and gave me
It
like the
did
full
too.
on accurate Lex.
But I did laugh out loud when they did the flashbacks and they show what he looked like before he got arrested, and he had that very, very puffy hair.
He looked like a bearded Australian Lex from the '90s comics.
He did, and it was really funny to look at because you're just like, you know what, Lex? I think prison did well for your appearance.
But giving him the Doomsday stuff, making him responsible for the death of Superman and for the death of Sam Lane, and then like he's so vicious in season 4, but like you need Lex to set himself apart as like the ultimate villain, you know, as like the true like arch nemesis. He's got to be like the worst enemy.
He sells it in the season. I think with one of my favorite lines I've ever heard a Lex Luthor say, which is just like, "Look, man, Superman's dead. Can we just enjoy the moment?" Like that line, I was like, "That's so fucked up."
And I didn't even realize this until some point, like after I finished the show. But it occurred to me, like this is the only time we've really had like mech suit Luthor, like in the power suit or whatever, in anything live action. It's never been done
Yeah,
before.
it's never. It's like been hinted at, but it's never. He never has done it like fully. Like I know. I feel like Snyder probably would have if he had enough time.
Well, I don't know,
And
given like
then
who he cast, but I mean
no, but
maybe,
like,
but
like it might have been something he would have done, but but we don't like I said, we don't really know. Like every other Lex Luthor, like I said, it has been one or the other. They've either been a mad scientist or some sort of just like
Wall
fucking
Street
business
tycoon.
Wall Street guy, and none of them have ever gotten to fight toe to toe with him. Even hell, even the animated series one didn't do it for a long time. He
It
didn't do
wasn't
it
until
till
Justice League. It wasn't
Justice
until like
League. Yeah,
the different show.
yeah, it's because he's like started dying in the middle of that show, and so it's like, oh fuck, and so it's fascinating that we finally got it. I wish it would last longer, but it's because of the budgetary reasons. They probably wanted it to last longer, but I still enjoyed it, especially with the weapons he had, like that fucking kryptonite needle drill thing. I was like, that's fucking scary.
Or when he replaced all of the street lights with the red solar lamps.
That fight is so cool, guys. You've watched that fight. It's so fucking awesome.
And I just learned this. I'm just browsing online now, looking at some information. But the Lex actor, Michael
It's like Kuditz, I think, something like that.
Cuddles, sorry if I'm getting that wrong, but he actually directed season 4, episode 8, Sharp Dressed Man.
Oh, he did?
So yeah, the one that I guess ends with him in the suit.
Yeah,
But
guys,
that's
you should
cool.
please watch the show. It's so good. Yeah, no, and then the fact that the finale did the ballsiest thing I've ever seen anything comic book related do, which is do a full. It broke the Superman curse that no other Superman ever had. Is he got an ending
Hmm.
the whole way through? Because like I know Smallville ended with him becoming Superman. It ends with the beginning
Right.
essentially, and then the closest we got was Crisis on Infinite Earths, but that's not really an ending. That's more just it feels more like an epilogue. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it felt like there was an ending that we didn't see.
Exactly. We finally have an ending from beginning to end, essentially. Not beginning, but you know what I mean. Like if we finally see the end of a Superman, and in such a I cried, I was bawling my eyes out in that last
Yeah,
episode.
that's got to be impossible to watch without crying. Like I don't think you're human if you can. They can use that to like test the robots in Blade Runner, but like watch this episode of Superman and Lois and don't cry.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil it fully, but it's the kind of ending that's just like I don't think you could have. I don't think any other Superman show could have done that ending because of the way the characters worked. Like even Lois and Clark, the New Adventures of Superman. If they had done this ending, I don't think I still don't think it would have worked the same way. Like it's fascinating. That's how much I loved these versions of everybody. That by the time it was done, I was just like, that was a hell of a ride. Although it did one thing that made me laugh, which is that like this isn't too much of a spoiler because it's a flash forward, is that they had new actors to play the boys grown up.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one reason and one reason only why it made me laugh. It's because the actor they got for Jonathan is Bitsy's husband in real life.
Oh, I'd forgot. Someone pointed that out to me. I'd forgotten that though, but
So they had met on the set of Grimm, which was a supernatural type
mhm.
show that was, I want to say, on like NBC or something. It's been a long time.
I
In
believe it
fact,
was in BC.
yeah, and then in fact they're talking about making another, like making some sort of movie thing about it. But um, but yeah, they met on that. They got married and everything, and so it's it was really funny watching them be like, "And my boys," and then I'm like, "Oh, that's your husband." Like I couldn't get it out of my mind. I'm like, okay, this is like it's throwing me off, but it was really funny.
Yeah, that's a little weird. But the thing with Lex in that last episode, that final scene of Clark and Lex, I think about that one all the time.
That's a powerful moment.
Yeah.
The idea that he's just like as things were going, he's like, you just got to forgive, no matter how fucked up something has happened. Sometimes you just got to let it go.
That was such a cool way to show off the strength of Superman, though. This is like his capacity to forgive. Like that's strong too.
Yeah, and that oh God, God, I'm thinking about it now. I'm getting emotional just thinking about that episode. But it's great, like, because you're seeing a Superman, you're seeing him change the world in a different type of way, in the way that Superman can, which is not with his fists, but with like his emotion, his capacity to do good, his capacity to make people want to do good. And I think that's the reason why that ending works the way it does.
Well, that's probably a good way to end our Superman and Lois discussion. But yeah, I do want to ask you, like, do you think this is the best ever Superman TV show?
Now that's done, I do. But it's not, and it's not because I'm belittling any of the other shows. It's because unlike the other shows, they didn't run into an issue where there were seasons I just outright don't like or giant episodes I just don't outright like. It's all tightly packed in a way. There's where even the stuff that you don't really like isn't that out of the ordinary, if that makes sense. Because when you watch Lois and Clark, you're like, oh, this is really good, but then they do that weird new Krypton storyline that doesn't work very well, and then they get weirder episodes as it goes on. And then when you watch Smallville, Smallville's really good in the beginning, and then it just gets really fucking dumb and gigantic chunks of it.
Yeah.
And then it's the Adventures of Superboy. It's because it's a Superboy show. It's fine. Like it's not the great home, but a lot of them at the end of the day they don't really get their endings either. Like most of them were canceled before they got an ending. Smallville's ending is the beginning of a story that I wish I could see, which I only have because they made a comic
Yeah, the
adaptation that
Brian
takes
Q.
place
Miller
after.
comics.
Yeah, and I have them all. They're right behind me in that shelf over there. And but we're never gonna, like, I know they talk about making it one of these days. We might do an animation version of it, and that they keep saying it, and it has never happened. But and so this version is like we got this wonderful, heartfelt story about a couple raising two kids in their hometown and learning to be a better family for it. And by the time it was done, I was just like, this was perfect to me. Everything that happened was perfect to me.
Yeah, I think this is definitely the best live action Superman show. I really love Superman the animated series, and my adventures with Superman ain't done yet. So
No,
I
it's
think
not
like
done yet. Yeah.
the jury's still out if it's the absolute best. But I will say that it is the single best live action Superman show, hands down. I see in the live audience, my friend Robbie is saying, I still haven't seen Soups and Lois because I struggle with CW stuff. I've rewatched the Reeve stuff and started a Smallville watch though. But yeah, Robbie, if you're digging Smallville, like you'll like my adventures, or I'm sorry, you'll like Superman and Lois.
Yeah, it never gets as ridiculous. This is gonna found really funny. It never gets as ridiculous as Smallville does. Smallville has some of the stupidest episodes I've ever seen of a television show. Sometimes, and
Yeah,
it's so funny what they get away with in that show.
yeah, it is insane what the type of stories Smallville was doing at the end of the show are so radically different than what it was doing at the beginning of the show.
Not even though, because season 4 held all the weird witch shit in it.
Yeah,
Like it
that's
started
when it
getting
started
weird
getting weird.
really fast.
It's like the show peaked at like that season 3 finale, and then like they didn't know how to top that. So it's like we're just gonna get weird, I guess.
No, it gets really weird as it goes on. But Superman Lois gets weird, but it never gets that weird. It never gets weird sorority vampire episode weird.
But check it out, Robbie, and let us know what you think. I think you'll really dig it. Um, oh, and he says he might read those season 11 Smallville comics. So
They're great.
there you
They're,
go.
they're really good. They add characters they weren't allowed to use. Batman's in there,
Hmm.
Green Lantern's in there, Flash, Wonder Woman. They're really good.
And that writer Brian Q. Miller worked on Smallville.
He did. That a lot of what he used, according to him, was like things that he had not considered doing. Also, by the way, for a lot of people who read newer stuff, George Jimenez, the artist who was great for Justice League, he did Batman fairly recently, the Super Sons. That was one of the first things he ever did. Was Smallville season 11.
Nice. Well, speaking of that, were there any other like Superman comics that you read recently? I know Aaron's Absolute Superman #3 just came out last week. I picked it up, but I have not had time to read it yet. But
It's really good. It's more about Clark's life on Krypton before, or Cal's, because we don't even know if he even has the name Clark really.
right, right,
It's more about Cal's life on Krypton prior, because a lot of what's different about this, because this isn't a spoiler if you haven't read the third one, because if you've read the other two, you already know that Cal was already like 10 or something, if not older, when
hmm,
before Krypton explodes. So it's more about him and his parents dealing with trying to figure out what's going to happen from here on, and then but also like sometimes, and then it ends in a way that's like I find interesting, but I don't want to spoil it because you haven't read it yet. And then the last Superman #21 that came out, I think it was the end of last month or
yeah,
the
in
middle of last month.
December.
It had it does more with the Doomsday stuff, and it's got a really cool panel on it that I did post about on my Facebook, as well as I think my Blue Sky, which is that if you've ever read The Death of Superman, there's this great panel where Clark is like doing this punch on Doomsday while a bunch of stuff is happening, and Dan Mora essentially recreated that one panel in like a flashback moment
Hmm.
where he's talking about the first time he fought Doomsday, and it's great to look at because one, it's because it uses the exact same onomatopoeia for the hits, so it still says crack and thum on it. But it's a great to look at because you see how different Doomsday has been since he first showed up on the scene, I guess. And so you look at him and he looks almost quaint compared to the way Dan Mora draws him in that scene.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, I saw you post about that. Speaking of Dan Mora, Justice League Unlimited #2 just came out, and that continues to be a really fun book
It's great.
featuring Superman.
I know it has it had a storyline that started, or a plot thread that started up, which is that after Absolute Justice, if you guys didn't read Absolute Justice, a lot of people's powers got scrambled in a weird way, and so it's still playing with the aftermath of that. And I was happy to see that they're still willing to acknowledge, hey, this did happen. So we do want to talk about this more outside of that. That's outside that one Superman thing that's going on right now.
And in Action Comics, Mark Waid was also writing a storyline there, but I assume like that's wrapped up. They have a new creative team taking over this week actually with Action Comics
Yes,
1082. John Ridley and Anaki Miranda on
they're going
art.
back to monthly as far as I know, because the
Yeah,
last one was the ending of the storyline. It was an okay one. I liked it for the most part. It was a Phantom Zone story. Now that it's all done, now that it is all done, I liked it for what it was. It retconned the idea of how the Phantom Zone came to be, as well as retconning some of the stuff going on with Mon-El here and there, but not by a lot. But I really enjoyed what they did with retconning how Jor-El had or how the Phantom Zone became a prison for criminals to begin with, which I really liked. And then as well as adding some more of the science stuff that Cal has in his head, I guess. And it's for some really great moments throughout it. It had some time travel in it as well. So by the time it was done, I was like, this was just fun. Like I get why some people were kind of iffy on it, but at the end of the day, I thought it was fun.
Well, if people want more Mark Waid Superman, there's still World's Finest, which has been going strong for like 3 years now. One of my favorite comics of the last few years. And the Williamson Mora book has issue number 22 coming out January 22nd. And then a week later on January 29th, there's a Lex Luthor special that ties into that series. So
It's good. Lex has amnesia currently, so I'm curious to see what that means.
yeah, I've not read the Williamson book, but I've been hearing Lex stuff, all throughout it. So
It's great because it starts off. This isn't really a spoiler because that's the premise of the first chunk of it, which is that now that Lex wants to help Superman out, and so he gives Superman control over LexCorp. But before he does that, he renames it Supercore, and then gives it to, then gives it to Superman. And so Superman has to deal with the fact that now he's now in charge of a large mega corporation essentially.
it's like
and is
season
using
5
them.
of Angel, like when
Yeah,
Angel takes over Wolfram and Hart. It's like that.
it's kind of like that, and it's a lot of fun because you see it's really funny because in the beginning all the scientists are like, "Oh my god, I'm so happy I get to work with Superman instead of having Lex Luthor tell me to make giant
Yeah,
death machines."
yeah. Instead of this maniac, huh?
It's so
That does
funny.
that does remind me. It's not a full-on Superman story, but it does feature Superman heavily. But I just read the Christmas miniseries that they did, Batman, Santa Claus, Silent Night.
Oh, is it the second one? I
Yeah,
never
it
read
was
the second one.
So it was not as good as the first one, but they do some really fun Superman and Santa stuff. Because in those comics, Superman is such a fanboy for Santa Claus as a canonical character in the DC universe. Like, why not? I mean, Zeus is a canonical character in the DC universe, so might as well have Santa Claus be there too. But yeah, the Santa Claus actually gives Clark a really cool gift that he gives him like a stopwatch that he can. I think or like a pocket watch. I think that's what it is. But he can like use it to signal Santa. So the way that like Jimmy Olsen has like a signal watch to summon Superman, now Superman has something to summon Santa.
I love that so much.
And he becomes a member of this Mark Waid Justice League Unlimited. So because that's
That's so
like the
fun.
cartoon. They have like every hero, every DC hero is in the Justice League, including Santa Claus now.
That's my favorite thing you've ever told me.
But yeah, so lots of cool stuff coming out. We'll be back soon. I don't know what we're talking about next. I might, Mike. I don't know if you have plans to catch up on Creature Commandos anytime
Oh yeah,
soon.
I will eventually. I just don't know when I'm planning to. But
Yeah, I think
it
that might
should
be a fun
sooner.
thing to review. Just spend some time just talking about our thoughts on that. Now that it is part of this the DCU that will be introducing David Cornswett's Superman later this year.
Yeah, it's gonna be very exciting to watch all that.
So we'll have plenty to talk about, and I know it's not like the best catchphrase to use, but it's still like the best I can think of. I'm starting to like it though, but we'll go ahead and close things off with the traditional. Until next time, keep it super.